guys.
That's what we do. We put on a good show.
Chris is trying to convince me to be a good person.
Beth's tired tonight.
I'm crabby.
But she's got her drink, we got the fire,
I got tea.
We got a kitty cat right here.
1 minute until showtime.
And we got 1 minute until our friends over at the Vibe Radio Network join us. And at that point, we'll go ahead and kick things off for this evening. But we like to go ahead and get you guys on Facebook Live going on the air just a couple, minute or so beforehand. Let y'all start tuning in. Yeah, there we go. We got some of our friends starting to come in on the feed here now. So good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And
hopefully you have power.
Yeah, hopefully you have power. I have a feeling tonight's going to be
quiet.
Quiet. Very, very quiet. We're very fortunate. We only lost power for a few hours yesterday.
Yeah. I was at work. He was here.
Yep.
Work had power.
Yep. But, yeah, I know people that lost power on Friday and
there are people still without power.
And
there are school districts closed because people don't have power.
Yeah. So we're lucky here at our Haunts of Richmond corporate headquarters that we only lost power for a little while. And
your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
And
hey,
just
Vibe
like
Network.
that, we got our friends at the Vibe Network with us here too, Vibe Radio Network. So we got everybody on board. Hopefully, got some people coming and going tonight. But we got an interesting episode tonight. Today, just so happens, is actually President's Day.
Which is why I decided on this theme, that apparently Facebook doesn't like us to promote.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
President.
Yeah, Facebook was being a bit finicky this past week. Did not even want me to let me set up this event in the first place. And even once we got past that, apparently Facebook is having a little bit of a algorithm shift in there, downplaying anything remotely politically related. And we think that this event for tonight did not get very much reach because it talks about presidents.
Dead ones.
Doesn't matter. We are apolitical. This is going to be an apolitical episode, not nonpartisan.
It was interesting to research this one, and I probably have enough to do more. So yes, here is Una. Lulu is wandering around somewhere.
Yeah, Lulu's over here, but yes, we got Miss Una here, our little attention fiend, to say hello. And
now, are you going under the blankie, sweetheart?
Probably.
Nope.
Oh,
yes, maybe.
Maybe not.
She's been wanting to go under the blanket quite a bit lately.
Yeah. She's learned that it's warm.
Yes, and Lulu has discovered the big squishy bed comforter on our bed.
Yep.
And Odin is on the other bed. All right, so anyway.
But anyway, good evening. And hope you are staying warm in this pretty
wonderful weather that is known as Virginia and elsewhere. And hi, Mom, yes, you are getting snow now.
Yes. Yeah,
up in Rochester.
But, yep, it's, I got ice and snow everywhere. I know people down in Texas that are without power because of ice and crap right now. So
I saw people posting 6 inches is what they've gotten so far.
Yep, pretty nasty stuff going on. But
anyway,
thanks again for joining us. And we a couple things. Again, hope the last couple weeks have been pretty well. Hope everybody survived the holiday that we wish was second Halloween yesterday. I know that we managed and got by as best that we could.
We had tea.
We did. We went out, we had tea, we did something Valentine-y, I guess if you want to call it that, but it was...
It was an excuse to go have high tea.
Yeah. It was nice. It was very nice. We enjoy high tea. If you've never done high tea, highly suggested. It's not just for the ladies. I gotta emphasize that. It's some very tasty nibblies.
Yeah, so if you're here in Richmond, Queen Bee Company is actually where we went.
Right across from the Jefferson Hotel.
Yeah, so highly recommend that. If you're down in the Petersburg area, Blue Willow is down there. We also recommend them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Other things that are going on. We gave tours.
Yeah.
Tour last night anyway.
Last night.
We didn't do Friday night's tour because ice storm.
Ice and snow, yep. But we are out here. We're still doing our thing. We got a tour coming up this next weekend, and we've decided that in March we are going to start ramping things up. We're going to go back to doing 3 tours a week. We'll be doing tours on Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, 1 tour a night, each night starting at 8 o'clock.
Yep.
So we'll be posting that schedule on our website very soon, and hope you can come on out and join us for that as we hopefully, knock on wood, start to warm up a little bit and get back into more favorable walking about season.
Yep. And our friends at Hanover Tavern have started up their ghost tours Thursday night, so definitely.
Yeah, it's not every Thursday night. They typically do them once a month, one Thursday a month, and that's going to be this coming Thursday. Hanover Tavern's Ghost Walks at Night. So if you're not familiar with them, or if you do not follow them on Facebook yet, go ahead, check out Hanover Tavern, and on their events page they will have information for their Ghost Walks at Night. Highly encourage you to go ahead and join them up there. They give some very interesting
Chris
tours
has
up
helped
there.
out with their tours.
Yep, I've helped them out. I helped them out around Halloween, and it's a lot of fun. And Hanover Tavern's just a really cool place. Period. So
Yep.
if you
and
go
you
up,
can have dinner beforehand.
yes, I was gonna say, yeah, don't hesitate to have a little nibbly at the tavern itself before you go ahead and take a tour.
Yep.
So I think that's what we got, and yeah, I think. So, good evening, everybody. Yep, we showed off the kitty cats, or at least Una. So, with that, we'll go ahead. We'll dive into our program for this evening, if you will.
So, we are going to talk about a couple of different places. Of course, we're going to start with the White House because that's where most of our presidents live, except for when it was being built or it's being remodeled. And we've talked about a few of these hauntings prior, so I was trying to find ones that were different that we hadn't talked about. So we're going to go ahead and jump into those. We're going to also jump over to the Vice President's house and also our private residences and the presidential libraries where the former presidents are known to haunt as well. So we're going to jump around, hit a couple of presidents. I definitely did not do them all.
Oh, we got...
Far too many stories to do them all in an hour, so there will be another president at some point in time.
Yeah. But we'll touch on that, and it kind of in the beginning. It's no surprise that there's so many ghost stories associated with presidents, and we could do multiple episodes on this. But this will be we're going to do this one for our President's Day tonight, and I'm sure that over time we'll manage to weave in some other ghost stories about presidents and other programs down the line.
Oh yes, definitely. So ghosts again can appear to anyone, and they are common in many, many cultures and societies around the globe. As it stands, ghosts are fundamentally nonpartisan. Here in the U.S., almost every president and their family, living or dead, has had a brush with the paranormal, and it should come as no surprise. If you are desirous of becoming president, it requires a level of drive and determination and energy that is associated with your ambition to be at this high office, and it actually sparks your energy as a spirit later on. For some presidents, they seem to be magnets for the paranormal activity, their life energy drawing the attention of the specters to them. For other presidents, their seemingly boundless energy in life has led their spirits to be restless in the afterlife. Many of the presidential spirits that seem to have the thing that they seem to have in common is character, charisma, and circumstance. Now, their hauntings reflect the presidents themselves and who they were while they were alive. The same holds true for many of the first ladies who are also haunters as well. They share their husbands' ambitions, and their spirits have sometimes risen to become even more famous than their presidential husbands. So today we're going to share tales from those who have risen to the highest office and the hauntings of their family and their afterlife. Any questions before I dive in?
Nope, go for it.
Okay, so starting at the White House, President Truman. He, of course, had a couple of experiences, but he was not one who liked to talk about them. So about 75 years ago, in 1946, President Harry S. Truman went to bed at 9 p.m., and his sleep was not undisturbed that night. In the wee hours of the morning, about 4 a.m., he heard it. Knock, knock, knock. Now, the sound against his bedroom door awakened him, and the events that followed were recorded in a letter that he wrote to his wife, Bess. Now, Bess frequently stayed away from the White House. She preferred their home back in Missouri. And this is one of the many letters that are actually archived at the Truman Presidential Library and Museum. And it reads as follows. I jumped up and put my bathrobe on, opened the door, and no one was there. I went out and looked up and down the hall. I looked in your room and Margie's. Still, no one. Went back to bed after locking the doors, and there were footsteps in your room whose door I had left open. I jumped up, looked around. No one was there. That damn place is haunted, sure as shooting. The Secret Service said not even a watchman was up there at that hour. You and Margie Betts better come back here and protect me before one of these ghosts carries me off.
For somebody that didn't buy into the paranormal too much, he certainly had his experiences there.
Yes, and he was quite forceful in his ways. Now, in a 1986 biography about her mother, Margaret Truman, the president's daughter, had said she and her mom were skeptical of all existence of ghosts, presidential or otherwise. But when she wrote to her father with skepticism about his paranormal experiences, he replied, "I'm sure they're here, and I'm not so much alarmed as to meet up with any of them at any time." All in all, this is fairly startling admission for a man who was noted to not believe in ghosts. It seems that the weight of the history and the solitary nights might have been enough to make Truman a bit of a believer, or at least welcoming of the paranormal. On other occasions, he wrote, "I'm sure old Andrew Jackson could give me a good advice and probably teach me a few good swear words. I'm sure old Grover Cleveland could tell me some choice remarks to make to some political leaders. So I won't lock my doors or bar them from any of the old coots in the pictures out there in the hall. And if they want to come out of their frames for a friendly chat, so be it." Now, while the Trumans would never discuss the paranormal with others, some stories have emerged from the nonetheless saying that both his wife and he heard pain-racked cries echo throughout the halls. They attributed these to the late Frances Cleveland, the only first lady to ever give birth in the White House. The experiences of the Truman family are just one small paranormal puzzle at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So I'm going to let Chris talk about Mr. President Tyler.
Yes.
Our Virginia homeboy.
Yeah, so whether or not one embraces or even mocks the paranormal, as some of the presidents have been known to do, the many accounts that have spilled out from the White House over the couple of centuries have given ghosts an undeniable place in the nation's history there. So there have only been a few presidents who have found themselves in the White House without a first lady at their side. President John Tyler found himself in that tragic position after his wife of 29 years, Letita, passed away from a stroke in September of 1842 after he had been in the White House for about a year and a half. Not content to remain single, Tyler started a somewhat tumultuous courtship with Julia Gardner, a New York socialite about 30 years his junior, which, well, that was common at that time in the mid-1800s. So while she rebuffed his proposals for over a year, she came to love the older gentleman's quiet strength, particularly in the aftermath of her father's sudden death in an accident. It's said that John and Julia can be seen in the moment where she finally said yes in the Blue Room at the White House. It's worth noting that John and Julia passed away here in Richmond and are buried at Hollywood Cemetery. Letita's final resting place is not far away either. She is buried at Cedar Grove Plantation just down the road in New Kent County. So we do have the Tylers have made their appearances there at the White House over the years. Now moving on to William Henry Harrison. This is a gentleman who was absolutely fascinating, but probably one of the most forgotten presidents because he's one of the shortest tenured presidents ever.
A little over a month.
Yeah. So now Tyler was preceded in the... What?
Oh, sorry. Nothing.
Okay. Now Tyler was preceded in the White House by President William Henry Harrison, and he was the first president, again, to die in the White House. Too much to get into in this episode, but tell you what, the first president to die while serving in office set off quite the constitutional crisis. Even though the vice president was technically there to go ahead and take over, the vice president, Tyler in this case, was not a very well appreciated gentleman, and well, they were more than happy to have him relegated to the vice presidency. A lot of people were very unhappy to see him rise to the presidency and tried to fight that. But that is
another whole story.
Another whole story, very historically oriented, not much for our paranormal stuff, but a very fascinating story nonetheless. So, anyways, this is the guy. Now, why was he in office so shortly? Why did he pass away after so little time? This is the guy who felt he needed to prove that he was still the steadfast hero of Tippecanoe on his inauguration day. The day was cold and wet, but Harrison refused to wear an overcoat or a hat. He rode to the ceremony on horseback rather than in the enclosed carriage that was available to him. He stood outside to give the longest inaugural address in American history, clocking in at about 2 hours. He rode the streets for the inaugural parade, stood in a receiving line for 3 hours at the White House that evening, and attended 3 inaugural balls that evening as well. Many attribute these activities and the lingering cold and damp of Washington in March of 1841 to the illness that confined him to his bed just a couple of weeks later and ultimately killed him 1 month after Inauguration Day. Harrison's brief tenure as president was apparently not enough time in the White House for his liking. He's said to haunt the attic, where he's heard rummaging around. And while no one knows what he's looking for up there, his spirit either refuses to leave or simply just can't. Legends has it that Harrison was cursed after Army troops under his command killed Tecumseh, a Shawnee leader in the War of 1812. Perhaps it is the curse that is forbidding him from getting his final rest. As a fun little aside, speaking of the War of 1812, there is an unnamed British soldier who perished during the War of 1812 that still roams the White House grounds holding a torch. Many believe that he may have been part of the group that burned the White House, then known as the Presidential Mansion, in 1814, but it is unlikely that he died at this time. British losses during the burning of Washington were few, and none are recorded as dying on the White House grounds. It's a wonder no one has ever seen the ghost of Dolly Madison trying to chase him off the lawn, as she has been known to do to those who sometimes wander in the Rose Garden. So that's a little brief touch on the Madisons. There's a whole lot more.
Because we already talked about her, so we're not going to touch on her again.
Yep. But yes, so.
But I would be thoroughly amused if Dolly started chasing the soldier around.
that would be right up her alley.
It would.
It definitely her demeanor. She was very, very protective of the White House and its artifacts.
Yes. All right, so we're going to go visit Mr. Lincoln again because he is the most famous president haunting that is seen in the White House itself. But he is not the first Lincoln that actually haunted the White House. That actually was his son Willie, who died in the White House in 1862 at the age of 11. Probably died of what we know as typhoid fever. Now, Mary Todd Lincoln, who was so grief-stricken by this loss, remained in her room for weeks. She spoke of seeing her son's ghost once at the foot of her bed, and she was not alone in seeing Willie. Years later, the Grant administration staff often reported seeing Willie throughout the White House as well, running through and playing. Now, after his assassination in 1865, Lincoln started to appear and joined Willie on their phantasmal roamings. First Lady Grace Coolidge spoke in a magazine accounts about seeing Lincoln look out of the window in what had been his office. And a more humorous turn, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill was once a guest in the White House, and he had a spirited run-in himself with President Lincoln. He said he had just stepped out of a hot bath and was wearing nothing but his cigar when he encountered Mr. Lincoln by the fireplace. Churchill reportedly said, "Good evening, Mr. President. You seem to have caught me at a disadvantage." So, Churchill.
Yeah, Churchill's quite a character. I'd be interested. Wonder, do we have any ghost stories on Churchill himself?
I haven't actually researched, but I'm sure we
Well,
might.
have to check that out one day.
I'll have to dive down that rabbit hole. Go
Oh
back to
darn.
Britain.
Oh darn.
Another rabbit hole. Merry old Britain here. Okay. Anyway, so again, Lincoln is the most common visitor in the White House. He is the one that also seems to carry the greatest burden. They say he always comes back whenever he feels that this country is in need or in peril. So he's another one who is always here trying to guide those forward. I wonder if he plays with DC.
I don't know.
Demon Cat.
Yeah, political issues aside, I wouldn't be surprised if he's been roaming the halls lately. We won't get into those details. But
back on track. We're not being political tonight.
No, it's not political. You just have to admit, regardless of your political standing,
it's been a bit busy up in DC.
Things have been a little tumultuous.
All right, so let's talk about Taft. In the year 1911, saw the administration of William Howard Taft calling the White House home. That summer, Major Archie Budd, an aide to the president, wrote a letter to his sister-in-law that starts as follows. "My dear Clara, it seems that the White House is haunted." So began what would become the only written record of the mysterious executive mansion ghost known as The Thing. Now, that July, word of an apparition appearing to the staff in the Taft's White House reached Archie Budd. Reported encounters seem to have been scaring the domestic staffers for months, as he recounted in his letter to Clara. The spooky tale told her of the remains to be an enduring question mark for what the White House scholars are even searching for an answer today. The gossip that was going around at the time is that the thing was felt more often than seen. Taft's housekeeper, who was considered a spooky little thing herself, reported that the servants told stories of feeling the thing appear as a slight pressure on the shoulder, as if a curious kid was leaning over to see what they were doing. But scolded the housekeeper, telling her ghosts have not the sense of touch, at least those self-respecting ghosts of which I have heard. But the servants maintained that it was in fact a spirit touching them. The thing was also one of the more unusual White House spirits because no one knows who he is. It's not a president or a first lady. It is this unknown boy of about 14 or 15 years old. Several of the White House staff reported feeling him touch the shoulder, as mentioned before, and they would turn around to see nothing in the room. Another member of the household, though, said she actually saw the ghost. Marsh, who was the First Lady Helen Taft's personal maid, said that she had turned around to actually see hi, sweetheart, ethereal figure leaning over her shoulder, and she described him as a young boy with light, unkept hair and sad blue eyes. And she said to herself, now who on earth can this be, because I cannot imagine. Taft responded to the news of this spooky rumor with a towering rage, but also informed his sister-in-law Clara that Taft banned anybody in the house from speaking about this ghost under threat of being fired. The president worried that the story would get out and the press would have a field day with the news. But his aides seemed to have a sense of humor about this whole situation. I reminded him that with the help that was in such a state of mind that it was positively believed that the upper floor of the White House was haunted, the servants there could not be kept in their places, even if you issued an executive order. Still, both of them found their curiosity piqued. They wanted to know who this was, and so they were anxious to hear about anything that the staff was having experienced. So, Butt was often on the end of the receiving end of the housekeeping staff's complaints. He started to keep a journal, and he was intrigued by this thing. I didn't care, or he didn't dare let any of them know how interested he was in this, but he kept telling them to be quiet about it, to ignore it, etc. Basically, they said that after about a year, the ghost would fade back into the background as the staff got busier and busier, relieving him of the duty of having to calm them down, especially with the superstitious employees. Now, even while publicly scoffing at this story, Buff privately began to actually research who this boy could be. He asked several different servants to tell him their stories, and he told Clara that he was going to delve into the history of the White House to see if he could find a boy matching the thing's description if he had lived, died, or worked at the White House. He never mentioned the thing in his letters to Clara again, and he never did tell anybody if he discovered who the thing might have been. Now, the modern White House historians have also now delved down into this rabbit hole of research, trying to figure out who the youngster is. Again, the only one they know that is haunting is young Willie, who's 11 years old. He doesn't match the description of the thing. Whoever this paranormal figure might be, Taft always seemingly was successful in squashing the rumors about it because, again, Butt's own private papers are the only ones where it's actually recorded. It never actually got outside, and there was a lot of paranormal activity that was reported in the newspapers from the early 1800s on up.
Mm-hmm.
So
sold newspapers. People loved reading it.
It did. Now, no one could find out whether Archie had discovered anything because, unfortunately, Archie took a little vacation, and his return trip was on the Titanic. Anything that he knew went down with him. Yeah.
Spoiler alert, the Titanic sank.
Yeah.
So yeah.
If you didn't know that.
Taft was definitely a very adverse individual to the paranormal as far as presidents go, but just because you're adverse to it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen.
Yeah, but that seems to be the only paranormal event was just this one ghost. He didn't see anybody else.
Well, he was certainly terrifying enough of the staff there that caused quite the ruckus in the Taft White House back in the day.
Yeah.
So just a couple of little, go ahead.
Modern experiences that have happened.
Sad. Of course he was on the Titanic facepalm. Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we want to go ahead. We want to touch on a couple of
recent presidents.
Very, very recent, more modern presidents and their the experiences that they had, and them and their families. These individuals still very much alive in this case. But yeah, we got some couple of little brief experiences to mention from when George W. Bush was in the White House, and also when President Obama was in the White House.
So one of these I actually found. George W. Bush's daughter actually gave an interview to Jay Leno, and he asked her about the hauntings, and this is what she said.
Yep. So Jenna Bush Hagger, as she is now known, the daughter of George W. Bush, lived there in the White House for a number of years, and she and her twin sister Barbara once heard 1920s piano music coming from the fireplace in their bedroom. This spectral DJ turned out to have eclectic tastes. A week later, she reported that her and her sister had fallen asleep in the same room, only to awaken to opera music drifting out of the same fireplace. No possible explanation. So there is apparently some spectral music that occurs in some chambers of the White House.
But considering they've had musicians there, their own presidents have been musicians. Marjorie played the piano quite a bit. In fact, her piano fell through the floor.
Happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then shortly after entering the White House themselves, the Obamas, First Lady Michelle Obama in 2009 told visiting school children that she and Barack sometimes heard strange noises in the hallway at night. During the Obamas' time in the White House, it is also said that people would sometimes feel something gnawing or chewing on their feet, including this happened to members of the Obama family themselves. Some think that there is a specter of a long-dead White House pet might be responsible for nipping around people's heels from time to time.
At least it's not the ponies.
Yeah.
From the Roosevelts.
Would you do that?
Yeah,
Huh?
she just landed as a thud on them in the middle of the night. All that White House china would be off the shelves.
So now we're actually going to go ahead. We're going to move away from the White House itself. But before we go too far, before we leave D.C., we do want to take a little bit of a detour over to the mansion of
The Vice President.
The Vice President. So this is just a couple of miles away to the northwest of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Since 1974, number 1 Observatory Circle, better known as the Naval Observatory, has been the official residence of the Vice President of the United States. During President Jimmy Carter's term in office, Vice President Walter Mondale's daughter, Eleanor, complained about a phantom that appeared in her bedroom one night when she was sleeping over in the mansion. Eleanor wrote about her paranormal experience, describing the apparition that she saw in the moonlight shadow near the window. She recalled, "I was so scared I fainted. Upon coming to, I reached for the phone and picked up the hotline to the Secret Service command post. I whispered that there was a man in my room and hang up. Just moments later, 2 agents busted into the room, guns drawn. However, they found no intruder in the room." Eleanor went on to tell them that she had seen a ghost, but the Secret Service agents were not very sympathetic to that answer and asked her that under no uncertain terms that she never do that again.
I'm sorry, I probably would have picked it up too.
Secret Service doesn't want to deal with anything that they
can't shoot.
can't shoot. Yeah.
They should come train down with our Capitol Police.
Now, we are, exactly. I mean, geez, our Capitol Police, they are very much well versed in dealing
things
with the paranormal.
in the executive mansion.
Yes, yeah. So, quick on that note, our buddy Paul Hope, his book "Policing the Paranormal," available via numerous outlets,
Including us.
Including us. You can get it via us.
And ours are signed.
Yes, we have signed copies that you can buy them when you come on out on a tour with us. So.
Yes, but he'll be happy to tell you about his paranormal experiences, including day one.
Yeah, we'll be more than happy to be able to actually get up and do a tour on the Capitol grounds again.
I'm going to be rusty.
Yeah, well, it's been almost a year.
Yeah.
It's been a rough year.
All right, so let's go back and visit George Washington. By the way, this is a ghost that gets around. He has quite the travelage log.
Yeah, but we are going to start location not too far from D.C. We're going to go down to Mount Vernon, just south of D.C., and in the spring of 1806, now this is, of course, several years after George Washington actually passed away in 1799, but a prominent Boston politician by the name of Josiah Quincy III stayed a night in the Mount Vernon in the room where George Washington died. Now, at this time, Bushrod Washington, George Washington's nephew, apparently hinted to Quincy that the ghost of America's first president granted an interview to some of the guests who stayed in the room, stayed the night in the room. Excuse me. And the normally steadfast politician allegedly told his son that he did indeed encounter George Washington that night. Quincy's theory as to why Washington's ghost was restless: he suspected that George was upset that his velvet coffin cover on his tomb had been ripped nearly to shreds by visitors looking to snag a souvenir. Perhaps this tale is a grand scheme by the staff at Mount Vernon to prevent visitors from touching anything. Solid theory. But I'd rather not risk upsetting the ghost of George Washington by disturbing anything at the house myself.
Especially since he travels.
Yeah. Museum rule number 1.
Don't touch.
Don't touch. Unless there's a sign that specifically says, please do touch, don't touch.
And don't steal.
And don't steal. Yeah, stealing's wrong. Stealing's bad. Now, as we mentioned, Washington's ghost, very well traveled, and not only does he haunt Mount Vernon, he's said to appear at 5 other locations as well. At least 5 other locations he's been seen over the course of history.
Yeah.
So, on top of this, he is not the only spirit said to linger at Mount Vernon, and this winds up weaving a very fantastic web of tales about Washington and his home, and so we're going to dive into a few of these stories. Now, many of the original stories of the hauntings came from Mount Vernon Ladies Association. When the ladies were at Mount Vernon, they slept in the mansion. These tales were diligently recorded and reported on over the years, and we start with the following account that was reported in the New York World newspaper around 1890. So, of course, the most interesting of all the bedrooms is the one belonging to the immortal George Washington, in which he died. It is the original 4-poster bed whereon Washington passed his last moments. This historic chamber is haunted, of that there would seem to be little doubt. Many people within recent years have slept in there, and they declare that they were awed by the viewless presence of the nation's first president. They deny earnestly that the notion is based on imagination. Few of these temporary occupants have been able to get any sleep. Obviously, it is one thing to see a ghost, and quite another to feel one to be aware of the nearness of a strange and brooding specter. They all agree that Washington visits his chamber in the still watches of the night. Miss William Beale and a friend of hers spent a night at Mount Vernon, and at their request they were permitted to occupy Washington's bedroom. In the middle of the night, they were awakened by the sputtering of their candle. They had lighted one surreptitiously. I should have looked up a synonym for that. I can't pronounce it. And were burning it in the middle of a basin of water. Fire protection type thing.
Yeah.
They fancied that they saw a spook. It went out. They saw a spook. It went out without a noise, and they began to feel alarmed. Mrs. Beale said to her friend, "You are on the side of the bed where Washington died." The other replied, "No, I'm not. He died on your side." Finally, they decided that the question was doubtful, and there was no more sleeping for them that night. They got up, dressed themselves, and sat around until morning, scared by every squeak of the windows, and at one moment they were sure they heard Washington's sword clank distinctly in the corner. After George Washington died in his bedroom, his wife Martha sealed up the room and moved into a bedroom on the 3rd floor. She confided to Nellie, her granddaughter, that George's spirit was still in the bedroom. Nellie asked if Martha was afraid of his spirit, and Martha replied, "Oh no, it's just that he needs his quiet time to ponder the nation's fate." Martha was a woman of great tact and knew to give her husband solitude when he confronted the pressing problems of leadership. She firmly believed his spirit was preoccupied with the problems of the young nation, thus the shutting off of the master bedroom from the rest of the house. Several of the servants also saw the same images of George that Martha had seen of him comfortably reading and thinking while in the bed of the master bedroom. So he still hangs out and lingers on pondering the fate of the nation in that room to this day.
Very similar to Lincoln. Alright, so another episode happened overnight when an interpreter who had worked at Mount Vernon on and off since 2004 returned to hear the state was abuzz with the latest spooky story. On December 15th of 2016, some strange sounds were coming from the third floor, and there had been reports of a temperature drop of 20 degrees. When the tale was shared with her, she was determined to see if it would happen again. So on December 14th, the anniversary of the general's death, she was on the third floor waiting for some haunting, but nothing happened. However, when she returned the next night, the vibe in the area had changed. Upon looking out into the southwest bedchamber, she noticed an electric candle was on. She thought that was strange. It was dark last night, and had the collections come around to turn it on? Probably not. The third floor isn't usually open to the public. And then it hit her. George Washington died on December 14th of 1799. The next day, Martha shut up the bedroom they had shared and moved into the southwest bedchamber on the third floor. Apparently, she's still marking that sad day to this day. Now, we will say that they do actually open up the third floor, at least pre-COVID times. They open it up during the Christmas holidays, but that's the only time they open it up. So that's the time if you want to go and see it. Now, Martha is occasionally also seen throughout the house, and she's just seen doing her usual domestic routine. She's seated at the dining room table as a misty, glowing form, and she often appears on the anniversary of her marriage to George. She was not a first lady that was very showy. She basically was very dignified. She hated being first lady. And she, again, basically is showing that in her death as well when she shows up at Mount Vernon. Hello, sweetheart. Now, of course, Martha and George are buried on site in a rock crypt, and it's often that Washington appears as a misty figure glowing slightly with green phosphorescence. He is said to appear there on the anniversaries of his death and on Martha's death, and he's even said to lay red roses on Martha's grave. They were, of course, not there the day before. An interpreter explains what happens to her anytime she is at Washington's tomb. And she says the first time she experienced their ghost was Easter morning of 2006. She was scheduled to open up Washington's tomb, and it was very early, very quiet. Nobody was around yet. The guests had not made their way from the mansion down to the tomb, and so she stood in front of the open door, and she saw ectoplasm in the far right corner of the tomb. When she moved, the ectoplasm moved. She watched it become a blur in her vision, and it continued to move around. She took some photos. The first one showed a streak of light through the blur, and the second one just showed the blur. As soon as voices of the guests coming down the hill were heard, the ectoplasm disappeared. She says this has happened to her on multiple occasions when she has been asked to open that tomb. In the 80s and 90s, head guard had repeated run-ins with the unexplained events at Mount Vernon. It was quite common for an alarm to go off in the stable, and then about the time it would take to unsaddle and put up a horse, then walk from the stable to the mansion, an alarm would go off in the Washington bedroom. Guards were dispatched to check out the situation in both locations and always found nothing out of the ordinary. Their explanation is that it was the general returning home, making his horse comfortable before going into his room. Now, Washington, as we said, has been seen in multiple locations. So another place he is seen is actually Woodlawn Plantation. And this is a plantation that was a wedding gift to his adopted granddaughter, Nellie. And he is seen returning there, and he is just an indulgent grandfather figure when he is seen there, happily smiling at his younger brood.
Yeah, it is worth noting as we adoptive granddaughter because
Again, he never had children with Martha. Martha already had children.
Yes, from a previous marriage. She was widowed. And, so George was more than happy to adopt Martha's children when he married her.
Yep. Now, of course, he's also seen at Yorktown, not surprising, major battle winning the Revolution. He is actually seen with a faint smile on his face as he accepts a rolled-up document from a grinning American soldier. And this is said to be the document of surrender that is being brought to him from Lord Cornwallis. If you have not known your history there, Washington sent a younger and less ranked soldier to gather the documents from Lord Cornwallis as a final snub to him. Kind of fun to read about that one.
Trina says that Washington was a very busy ghost.
He is.
We're not even done yet.
He's also at Gettysburg.
Now, this is one that really kind of takes people by surprise, but it is a well-recorded case.
Yeah, it was actually recorded by two different people at two different locations. He was appearing at the Battle of Gettysburg during the Civil War. He's said to appear in full uniform on his white horse, and he is bolstering the morale of the Union troops. Now, this may seem odd to people, but if you look back through his journals, he actually recorded, while he was at the winter camp at Valley Forge, a dream that he had where he actually saw the forward progress of the Americas. And he saw at one point in time in his dream a map of the U.S. and it slowly growing more and more. And then there was a break in the U.S. and then it healed back up again and grew even more. And so he foreshadowed in this dream the Civil War. So for him to show up at a very pivotal point of a battle to make sure that that break heals back up.
And we'll get into that a little bit more. We got one more for him even after Gettysburg here.
Yeah, so he was seen at Little Round Top twice. Now the last place that he was seen is Fort Monroe here in Virginia. And this one is at the end of the Civil War, and this is where Jefferson Davis was actually being held post-war. The guards overheard the former president of the Confederacy receiving a stern lecture from a visitor, though they never saw anybody enter the cell or leave the cell. Shaken Jefferson Davis did admit to the guards of being visited by Washington in a vivid dream to be berated for his betrayal of the United States. Now, while Gettysburg and this might seem like Union propaganda, if you actually look back at Washington's history as a commander, this is not out of character. He acted very much like this in his lifetime. So he abhorred sectionalism, and he was known for reprimanding anyone who failed in their duties and responsibilities, and he thoroughly thought Davis had failed. And as before we dive any deeper into this, we're just gonna we're going to leave Washington's political beliefs in his afterlife aside.
But yeah, it's very interesting. Even though he was a Virginian, he would have, his historical statements do point towards the fact that he would have been absolutely
against the
Civil War and the separation, because that was the kind of sectionalism that he feared, even upon the creation of the Constitution and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So.
Because, you even saw the beginnings of it when they were trying to even come up with our first Bill of Rights and our Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, so, it can be a little controversial. Certainly,
Pete's. I got Pete's.
Yep, so before we dive in any deeper into a political and philosophical debate about Washington's possible opinions about American history after his death, we'll move on to a subject that is,
another controversial president.
Yeah, just as controversial.
I did find the more controversial ones show up more often.
Hey, controversy sells.
It's that energy.
Something, yeah. So, this individual. It's no secret that mentioning Andrew Jackson's name can ignite a heated argument or at least awkward discomfort among some people.
Old Hickory, here we go.
Yes. The man has tasked us with the considerable burden of distilling his legacy. He possessed legendary skills in battle and was an effective leader on and off the battlefield. He also had a great appreciation and love for his family and for the unity of the United States. Of course, those admirable traits are sharply balanced against some of his more controversial actions and negative qualities, most prominently being the Indian Removal Act that subsequently led to the Trail of Tears, and his status as a prominent slave owner who may have possessed as many as 300 slaves over the course of his life. So, yeah, complex legacies aside, Andrew Jackson led an absolutely fascinating life, and a few interesting facts about the man to kind of lighten the mood, just a hair, maybe. We'll see. Maybe these facts might be considered controversial as well, but in any case, he was the first president born to immigrant parents. His parents arrived from Ireland and settled in a remote area of the Carolinas only 2 years before Andrew was born. Jackson served as a courier in the Revolutionary War at the age of 13 with the encouragement of his mother. Both of his brothers and his mother died as a result of the Revolution, leaving him an orphan at the age of 14. Jackson and his wife Rachel never had any children of their own, but they did adopt 3 children, including an orphaned Native American child named Lincoln, who was found after the Battle of Talluscahatchee in 1813. Jackson had a pet parrot named Pole. Pole outlived Jackson and attended his funeral service, where he cursed at the mourners. Now, Jackson is laid to rest at the Hermitage, his home in Tennessee, which is now a National Historic Landmark. This is not to be confused with the Hermitage Hotel in downtown Nashville, which was named right after Jackson's Hermitage, and the hotel became a National Historic Landmark in its own right just a few months ago on August 28th of 2020. So, there's a couple of Hermitages. We're talking about the Hermitage that was Jackson's home and where he is buried.
Now, Patrick made a comment about the Bell Witch story. I chose purposely not to include the Bell Witch with this one. We're going to put that one in another one.
Yes, we'll get to that. We'll mention it at the end of the episode.
But just so you know.
we will not forget about that. So, about the Hermitage. The ghost stories of Andrew Jackson's Hermitage date back to the late 19th century after the departure of the Jacksons. The last of the Jackson family moved out of the residence in 1893 when Andrew Jackson III and his family left. The property didn't languish, however, as the Ladies' Hermitage Association took ownership of the premises to operate as a museum. At first, the association had not yet hired a caretaker for the property, so a couple of the ladies of the association volunteered to stay in the house overnight to ensure that it wouldn't be vandalized. 2 of the women prepared their pallets to sleep in the front parlor and retired for the night. Then the noises began. Loud, aggressive sounds from the butler's pantry, sounding like chains rattling. The mysterious noises became louder, and suddenly a rolling boom that could have shaken the home right off its foundations echoed through the building. The women described the bone-shaking sound as a horse being ridden through the main hallway. And all of a sudden, the front and back door of the hallway burst open, and they could hear a voice say, "What are you doing in my home?" They assumed that this was Andrew Jackson himself, of course. The experiences carried over through the decades. More recently, on a night after an event, an employee shared the evening with something that was determined to be heard. The employee began to make his rounds, making certain everything was in its place in preparation for locking up for the night. He whistled to himself as he walked the empty hallways and checked the empty rooms when he noticed something. He wasn't the only one whistling. He frantically searched for whoever it could be. Who was the other person whistling with him in the middle of the night in what he believed to be an empty hermitage? He searched everywhere, top to bottom. The whistling continued. He eventually called his boss to come and meet him, as the phantom whistler had him entirely out of sorts. Another employee recalled another strange occurrence after hours in this way. "I was working late one evening and all the lights were off. At that time, Jackson's carriage was down the hall. All of a sudden, in my peripheral, I caught this white flash, and I didn't think anything of it. The next day, I got an email from a guest of ours who had come here as a tourist, and they sent me a picture of the carriage from the day before, and in the paint on the carriage, you saw the outline of what looked like Rachel's face." So apparently Rachel is still lingering about the Hermitage herself and making herself appear from time to time. Now, the ghosts of the Hermitage are not relegated to just the inside of the building. Hi, Una. Una's giving me a look. So, the spirits that haunt the Hermitage, they are also outside and it's worth noting, 1819, Andrew Jackson hired an English gardener to design the perfect garden for Rachel. Rachel added beautiful flowering plants to the garden in 1825, creating a favorite place for her to spend time. But, sadly, in 1828, Rachel passed away after 3 years of failing health, leaving her husband to enter the White House as a widower. When Rachel died, Andrew buried her in the garden she loved. An architect designed a tomb for her in 1831. His love for Rachel was eternal. Before he passed, he would visit her grave every afternoon, smoking a cigar and talking to his Rachel with longing in his heart. When Andrew's time on the mortal coil came to an end in 1845, he was laid to rest in the same tomb with the love of his life. Shortly before he passed, Jackson was quoted as saying, "Heaven will be no heaven to me if I do not meet my wife there." Today, many people report seeing and feeling the ghost of Andrew Jackson in the gardens. People have heard footsteps roaming between the foliage and have seen the garden gate swing open on its own. Then there is the undeniable smell of cigar smoke near the Jackson's tomb. Could Andrew's spirit still be stopping by to visit his beloved Rachel? Seems likely. He certainly put every ounce of his being into that woman.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is another beautiful space on the grounds of the Hermitage, and they are known as the Groves. Strolling amongst the trees can be very relaxing, and if the trees appear to be curated specifically for the space, that's because they were, in fact, curated for the space. None of the trees are native to the grounds there. Each tree was removed from a battle site where Jackson fought and replanted in the grove of the Hermitage. These trees hold all of the tragic history and memories of violent battles and lost lives. The trees never forget. Guides at the Hermitage have reported seeing the ghostly apparitions of soldiers wandering through the grove. Visitors claim to have felt cold spots or experienced moments of extreme temperature drops and full-body chills while visiting the old, displaced trees. Are the soldiers who died amongst these trees on far-flung battlefields still lingering in their shade? Many historians consider the Hermitage to be the most well-preserved early U.S. presidential home, and thousands of people visit the Hermitage every year. But when the crowds leave, you never know what you might see. So, you have to get down there.
Yes.
You have to get to Tennessee, period. I haven't visited there.
I did when I was going looking for colleges.
Yes.
One night in Nashville. I didn't see much besides the Titanic.
Yeah, well, you weren't old enough to drink then either.
I wasn't.
So,
I am now.
go back and party in Tennessee. Another time.
Yes. So another controversial president because
Controversy.
they're the ones who jumped out the most when I first started researching. Nixon! It is time for Nixon. And we're talking about his presidential library and museum. Now, the Nixon Presidential Library and birthplace in Yorba Linda, California, is just a short 43-minute drive from downtown LA. This complex includes Nixon's library, a museum, gardens, and his birthplace home. It also happens to be his final resting place, so you can stay the entirety of Nixon's legacy from his first to last breaths are bound to this location. Perhaps that's why shortly after Nixon was buried on the property, rumors began to spread about the unusual paranormal activity. Many of the people who come here suspect that it is Nixon himself who haunts the property to this day. Now, the first reports of paranormal activity and disturbances came from a night watchman. One evening, he claims to have seen a thick, hazy green mist hovering over and around Nixon's headstone. Late one night, on a separate occasion, a guard saw the figure of a man entering the front door of the president's birthplace home. When he went to apprehend the intruder, he was surprised to find the door was locked. He felt no living person could have entered the home. In the presidential library, again, late at night, other guards began to hear rapping noises on the area that displays the Watergate tapes. Excuse me. This cause for the sound was never discovered, and the mornings after the rapping sounds, when people were hearing the tapes, they would always malfunction. About 20 years ago, a psychic medium was quoted as saying the tapping sounds was Nixon's way of distracting visitors to keep them from concentrating on the Watergate material. Since then, there's been a renovation to the museum and the exhibit space. It's said that the Watergate tapes themselves no longer malfunction. However, there are newer digital displays that were installed as part of the renovation, and they have a record of shutting down without explanation. Visitors to the center have also reported strange occurrences and discomforted feeling of being watched. It's common to catch a glimpse of the figure out of the corner of one's eye, usually a fleeting image of someone walking nearby. When turning to give this person a closer inspection, no one's there. Others have reported inexplicably cold drafts throughout the buildings at the complex, and one witness reported being touched by an invisible, cold, clammy hand. Richard isn't alone in his museum and library. It's said his wife Pat is also there to keep him company. She passed away just 10 months before her husband in June of 1993 and is also buried on property. And her ghost is seen, of course, near her own burial site, and she enjoys the rose gardens that are actually right next to it.
I misunderstood. Patrick, I think I thought you were talking about a haunted men's room, but Patrick's been to the Hermitage Hotel. And apparently it has a world-renowned men's room.
You mean you get a haunted bathroom and I don't?
It doesn't look like it's haunted. At least nothing in here about being haunted.
It's just ooh la la.
It's ooh la la. So much so that they have actually opened it up so that men and women alike can use the space, because they did not want to deprive the ladies of this gorgeous restroom.
Well, I feel lucky. All right, shall we jump to our last president, sir?
Yes, we shall.
This one's fun. It's actually the first lady.
Yeah. So not so much the president, but this gentleman, very controversial in his own time. He's not known in hindsight as being one of the more controversial presidents, kind of by modern historical standards.
But let's just say it wasn't a good presidency.
Yeah. So, anyways.
There was talk of impeachment.
Yeah, and another one that very, very fascinating rabbit hole of history that we could dive down into, which
There's a lot of rabbit holes of history. I get lost so easily.
We love our rabbit holes, though. So, in some cases, presidents are outshone by their first ladies when it comes to the paranormal tales. And the most prominent example is James Madison. James Madison's wife, Dolly, as we previously mentioned, is a well-known spirit at the White House. We come to another prime example of this with President Warren Harding. Now, the specter of Florence Kling Harding appears both at the hotel where Harding died and also at their home in Marion, Ohio. To put it plainly, the Harding administration was filled with scandal, corruption, and ineptitude. While in the White House, Florence dedicated herself to protecting her husband and his legacy. Warren Harding died suddenly at the Palace Hotel on August 2nd, 1923. The exact cause of death is not known, as Florence would not allow an autopsy. Even the new president, Calvin Coolidge, dared not override her decision. Some believe that she poisoned him to spare him the disgrace of impeachment that was being called for due to the malfeasance taking place within the administration, but now we'll never know for sure. Florence herself died on August 4th, 1924, just a shade over 2 years after her husband, and we will never know what secrets she may have taken with her to the grave. With that said, her story doesn't end with death. It appears she is even protecting Warren from the great beyond. The Harding home, a former residence of Warren G. Harding, has experienced some pretty creepy paranormal activity. And as a matter of fact, the paranormal weirdness surrounding the Hardings started shortly before Warren's death. So, the story starts with actually a pet finch owned by Mrs. Harding. According to the tour guides at the Harding home, Mrs. Harding wasn't particularly fond of Petey the finch, but since it was a gift, she felt compelled to take it. Perhaps to show her displeasure, she named the bird Petey after her ne'er-do-well first husband. Miss Harding would cover the bird cage with a cloth at night, and the bird would go silent. Now, Mrs. Harding is said to have believed in astrology and even regularly consulted a clairvoyant named Madame Marcia. Miss Harding's beliefs led her to look for omens in the world around her, and on the night before Mrs. Harding and her husband were supposed to depart for a trip to Alaska, Petey inexplicably began to sing from beneath his covered cage. For Mrs. Harding, this was a bad omen, and rightly so. Warren died on that trip. Petey ended up outliving both President Harding and Mrs. Harding, and visitors to the Harding home can now see Petey for themselves, stuffed and under a glass jar in one of the bedrooms of the Harding home. Petey, the Finch of Doom, as they...
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. So, as we mentioned, controversial guy, President Harding, and, people, sometimes they'll like to take a little jab at him or something like that. Well...
Never do that in a president's home where the wife was very protective.
Yes, so I think it's safe to say that if you're ever going to visit a dead president's home, or a dead person's home in general, it's probably not... You probably shouldn't badmouth them on their home turf. If you're going to visit a historic figure's home, don't talk trash about them.
It's rude.
It's kind of rude. And, well, visitors to the Harding house who make negative comments about the 29th president have been known to feel a sharp rap on the elbow or knee. Unkind words can also lead to a mysterious stumble on the porch steps or a flat tire in the parking lot. One visitor claimed his new car had been scratched in the parking lot behind the house after he had made crude jokes about Harding's well-known fathering of an illegitimate daughter. It's thought that Florence did not take kindly to this visitor's comments. She has also been seen staring out of the windows of the house late at night after he has been locked up for the evening. It is worth noting Harding himself has been known to appear to the living on a rare occasion, not too often. When he does, he's usually just sitting on the front porch or in the living room, and he will flash to you the broad smile that he was known for and then just fade from sight. Some people say that is the smile that ultimately won him the presidency.
Whereas Florence will say, well, now that I got you the presidency, what are you going to do with it?
Yep.
She wasn't shy.
No, but yeah, he more or less just took to granting political favors and kicking back and living the high life in the White House.
Well, she worked a lot.
Yeah, protecting his legacy because it was her legacy in turn.
So their home is not the only place that they haunt.
Now we mentioned that there is another place that Florence haunts, and this is actually the Palace Hotel in San Francisco. It's a well-known landmark just east of Union Square and New Montgomery Street. The original structure was destroyed by fire in the 1906 earthquake, and the present building was built in 1909 and used the salvaged steel from the original building. It is renowned for its peaceful luxury. However, that does not stop Florence Harding's ghost from shushing the guests. The experiences of the guests are always the same. They walk down the corridor of the 8th floor, talking or guiding energetic children to the room when a stern-looking woman in her 60s appears. She is wearing a dress draped in beads, very 1920s in style. Her hair is styled in tight waves, and steel-rimmed glasses frames her fierce eyes. Quiet, she demands. The president is resting. Many will ask, the president of what? And the reply inevitably is, the President of the United States. Guests are duly impressed, and they tiptoe quietly down the hall. Shortly thereafter, a bellhop or front desk clerk will be asked about the president staying in the hotel. If they are new to the hotel, they will blankly stare at the guest and will not be able to answer. However, if it is an experienced or seasoned member of the staff, they will inform the guest that it is Florence Harding's ghost, aka the Duchess, as they call her, and they are not the first to encounter her ghost trying to protect her husband. So just be warned that if you decide to visit any of these presidential haunts, please do be on your best behavior. I don't know why I'm handing it to you. That is the last story that we have for you this evening.
So I hope you guys enjoyed our trip down to the presidential haunts and hauntings.
Yes. So, yeah, of course, that is just scratching the surface. There are many, 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 many paranormal tales associated with the presidents of the United States. We'll see how we do them again in the future.
There's going to be a few that show up in our future plantations. Because there was a question, are we going to do Belgrove? And that's going to be on our plantations script that I've started, but I haven't finished yet.
Belgrove and is the
Sherwood.
Bell Witch.
We're going to do a witches one coming up. We are, of course, going to do an Irish Celtic one because we got St. Patty's Day coming up.
Yep. That'll be, gosh, it's coming up on 1 year.
Yeah.
Our very first one was actually Irish Haunts.
Yep.
When we sat here in front of the fireplace and did it on our phone, so you had it in the nice...
we're really close together.
Yeah.
Because we hadn't figured it out yet on the big one.
So we've come so far.
We have. But yeah, so we have a couple more ideas coming up, but the next one is going to actually be haunted restaurants, because usually we have a restaurant week here in the city of Richmond, either at the end of February, beginning of March. Not happening, obviously. Hasn't happened for a whole year now.
Yeah, typically we do it a couple times a year.
Yeah.
Have they completely ruled it out? I don't know.
I haven't seen anything about it yet.
No.
But since it's normally about this time that it happens, I decided, well, let's do a haunted restaurants one to start us off in March. And so that'll be our next topic. But any questions, comments, real quick?
My bad, I missed a
well, you
whole
were
bunch
reading.
I was. And
I can't exactly reach the computer.
Patrick thought that there might have been a ghost story associated with the Hermitage hotel bathroom, and maybe there is.
Possibly.
Possibly, we can do a little research.
Yep.
So if there is, we'll find it. Yeah, we'll probably do haunted hotels again some point down the line.
Oh yeah, because I got way too many haunted hotel stories saved.
But we might just have to dodge around anything that could be conceived as politically themed, such as presidential ghost stories. We might have to weave those ones.
I have to wait until Facebook relaxes a little.
Balances out their algorithm so we don't get filtered out. So let's see. Oh, Patrick started just sharing something interesting, not necessarily ghost related. It is very interesting. The picture of that bathroom is immaculate.
It's an Instagram worthy bathroom.
Yes, it is.
There are several reasons.
Patrick, it's all good, Patrick. You don't have to worry about staying on topic in the future. It's fine.
We're really good at going down tangents.
Oh, gosh, are we ever. Have any bird noises ever been reported at the Harding home?
Not that I was able to find. The Harding home was kind of hard to actually get a lot of information on, because a lot of the tour guides there don't like to talk about the hauntings. They don't want to say that the place is haunted. So it is people who have been there on tours and those experiences that got reported and then put into ghost books. And a couple of the older guides will even say what's been put in the ghost books isn't even accurate. So that one was a little difficult.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, some historic places, they fully embrace their haunted heritage, and other ones are like,
Nope,
we ain't talking about it.
Yeah.
So, is what it is.
Yeah, I did find a story about a clock that supposedly stopped at the time of Harding's death and then restarted a week later. That's the biggest story that most of the tour guides say is absolutely not right. And when you look at their logic and what the story is, it actually makes sense that it doesn't equal out.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we try to make sure that, I mean, people sometimes, you can take your haunted stories with a grain of salt, but we try not to go out of, try not to share anything that's been deliberately just fabricated for the sense of sensationalization. We think
that story in particular might have been fabricated.
Yeah, so
we didn't include it.
Yeah. But yeah, so a couple weeks, haunted restaurants, and I don't think there were any other questions for tonight.
Cool. So we hope you all enjoyed. Again, we are running our tours. Starting in March, we'll be running 3 days a week. And we'll, of course, be here every other Monday.
Yep. So I think that's it. And real quick, again, remember, if you get the opportunity, check out our friends up at Hanover Tavern, Ghost Walks at Night, this Thursday. Always a good time. I think I think specifically our good friend Tiffany, I think, is actually going to be the guide for Ghost Walks at Night.
She is.
And she is a, oh gosh.
She's
sorry.
experienced
storyteller in her own right.
Yes, and she's also with the Transcend Paranormal. So.
Yes. So,
yeah.
With that, before we go and yes, so that's right. If you are willing and able to contribute to our future explorations,
please make me go buy books.
Yes, we do. We buy. We have a considerable library that is continuously growing with ghost stories to share and stuff like that. So if you want to contribute to this library and our research efforts, you can just shoot us a little thing from Venmo. We are at Haunts of Richmond. I'll throw it in the comments too. You don't have to. If you can, if you want to, we appreciate it. But all with that said, we also greatly appreciate you just tuning in and sharing some time with us too as we share some ghost stories. We love being able to interact with y'all like this. So thanks again for watching tonight, and we hope to all see you all again here in a couple of weeks. So with that, stay safe and
stay dry.
Stay dry
if you can.
Yeah, and feel free to reach out to us anytime. We're happy to chat, not just here during these shows, but anytime at all. So with that, good night, everybody.
Bye.